Good afternoon, my friends. My name is Michael C., and welcome to 12 Step Spirituality. This is the sixth session on Step 6, Living in the Pause. And our conversation this afternoon is around taking the pause and healing. My friend Adam G. is with me. I'm going to take you back and get Adam now, and we will get right into the conversation. So bear with me here as we go back and find Adam. There he is. I'll unpause him. Hi, Adam.
Hey, Michael. How are you today?
I'm good, my friend. How are you?
It's another great day.
Well, let's get right at it. When you and we always have conversations before we have this one. And by the way, I find them to be so useful and helpful for my own recovery. So thank you. But when we talked yesterday, you said something to me that struck me, and I wanted to get you going on that, and that was that step 6 was very different from the other 12 steps, and that got me thinking a little bit, and I wanted to get you to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard that early on when Bill Wilson put these steps together, he just had 6 steps. That's what he got from the Oxford group. And he thought 12 would be a better number. And so he starts making steps. And I wondered about 6 a lot. Like, was this step part of the other one? So I'm just going to put this slide up for a second. And let's just look at the action verbs with all the other 11 steps. We admitted, came to believe, made a decision, made an inventory, admitted, humbly asked, made a list, made amends, continued to take inventory, sought, carried, practiced. And then we have step 6. We're entirely ready. It describes a state of being, less of an action to do. And so, that for me raises a few questions, and I suspect it does for you too, Michael. One is, how do I get to this state of entirely ready? What do I got to do? Is it something that just happened because magically I went through steps 1 through 5 and now I'm ready to go? Or is there something more that I can do to move things along in the right direction to get entirely ready?
I'm just fixing this so that I go away and they can see you. I don't know what happened to Zoom. Give me a second.
Yeah.
Here we go. All right.
All right.
So, yeah, and what I found it got me reflecting on how that changed over the years. And you were talking about it almost in stages, that there's that first stage in step 6 where when I came in broken. And I've never been so willing to go to any length to make the obsession go away. So I said, be careful what you tell me, because whatever you're going to tell me, I'm going to do it. And so the step 6 is I did my rite of passage, the initiation in 4 and 5. But then, okay, now what? And you had this term called act as if. That
right.
Once you're entirely ready and whatever that asking for it to be removed, act as if it is. And that I found that to be, yes, me too. So talk a little bit about that.
Right. It's not my original idea. And I did read a book called Drop the Rock. I won't remember the name of the author, but it was based on a talk that Sandy B gave. And he talked a lot about the way we do 6 is we act as if. And I had already been introduced to this idea. So I finished step 5. My instinct is get busy, get to work. And I think now that I know what my character defects are, I got some stuff to do. I don't have to act on them anymore, and I can exert my will in this area, right? Not so fast. My sponsors tell me, you can't remove your defects. You can't fend them off. Your resolution not to act out on them won't work. You can't even choose which defects God will remove or when they'll be removed. All right, so now what? There must be something I can do. And the first thing that was given me to do was this acting as if. I can't think my way to better acting, so I act my way to better thinking. And really, if we think about we're entirely ready, this is a mental state or an emotional state. How do I get ready to do something? And so I was asked to act as if I was entirely ready. This meant trying new behaviors I didn't feel like trying and abandoning old ones I didn't want to let go of, right? So, when I'd feel myself feeling judgmental about someone, for example, I was told to act as if you're not judgmental. Act towards that person as if you're not judgmental towards them. And, I could do that for a while, but it only gets me so far because my willingness to act as if is inversely proportional to my level of desperation. So the further I get away from that desperate feeling, the more I'm convinced of my own power and my own ability, the less I'm willing to act as if. I just start, kind of doing what I want to do, right? And anything that is based on willpower alone can only go so far. Eventually, the combination of the trauma that we talked about last week and the deeply grooved reactions to life, they'll bubble up. My example is the dishwasher. Big fights with my wife over the dishwasher. I've talked about this at meetings and heads nod. For some reason, we all fight about the dishwasher. And I would resolve, I'm not going to do that next time. And then we'd be loading the dishwasher a few weeks later, and there we'd be fighting about it. I had resolved never to do this again. It was this deeply grooved reaction. So the solution of act as if it's a mile wide and 2 inches deep. It really compounds the problem that Bill specifies in chapter 6. More than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. He's very much the actor. To the outer world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but he knows in his heart he doesn't deserve it. So in the language of centering prayer, this is all about the false self and the true self. We're trying to come closer to our true self. This is where we're nearest to our Creator. And we're trying to dismantle the false self, which is the self we project as a defense mechanism. So even though act as if it has a role, if I get too attached to this act as if persona, eventually the shadow self, it's just going to bubble up anyway. And I still have some deep excavation work to do, even if I'm acting as if, right?
Yeah, I need to hear people that have more time in than I do say that so that I know I'm not going to be going, anywhere anytime soon. That there's always the next. And as you were talking, that this whole idea with acting as if, I latched onto that, and took me into my recovery. But I want to keep it evolving. It's not like I want to leave that behind, but I get to a point, and I hear it in the rooms all the time. Whatever got you to where you're at, not going to take you to where you want to be, right? Nothing changes if nothing changes. So what was life? What's the next? And you talk about it as a stage. We're still practicing this particular step, but there's another stage that we're brought to, and we bring act as if with us. We don't abandon it, but there's another revelation that takes us, I've come to call it over the years, from tier 1 recovery to tier 2.
Right. And, Bill, he only devoted one paragraph to step 6. In the big book, I don't think it was fully fleshed out. I now looking at it, I kind of see it as the heart of our healing.
Yes.
But at the time, I don't think he had an idea what exactly it was to mean. So he wrote, we've admitted certain defects, we've ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. Now these are about to be cast out. When I heard the words cast out, I love this. This sounds like a solid plan, Michael. Cast out, get rid of it, bye-bye. But at about 5 years sober, casting out wasn't going so hot for me. And my personal relationships were an absolute train wreck. So I started seeing a psychologist. And in therapy, it was suggested to me that my defects of character were a survival response to growing up in the uncertainty and trauma of my alcoholic home. They weren't these demons to be cast out. They were actually what had kept me alive and survive in a tough situation. So, and as you and I know, we've talked about this a lot. A lot of my strengths come from that. Maybe my focus on work or whatever. Some of the things that are strengths come from this too. So his suggestion was embrace them, express gratitude for them, express the intention then to let them go. You're no longer of help to me. So I was evolving in my understanding of inventory. As Rohr puts it, a searching and fearless moral inventory is for the sake of truth and humility and generosity of spirit, not vengeance on the self or some kind of total victory over the self. We talked about this in 4 and 5. We're trying to take this more loving and gentle approach, right? The action I could now take was edging me closer to acceptance. I needed to embrace who I was, defects and all, because it wasn't really possible to surgically remove the bad parts, right? They're still a part of me. So this was definitely a step in the right direction, but I ran out of gas on this too. It was really a good intention, but I just couldn't sustain it. In order to really embrace my shadow self, the self I had been conditioned to suppress and hide, that required a baseline level of seeing myself as basically lovable, basically worthwhile for the required level of effort. I was pretty convinced that what defined me was my brokenness and my badness. I had not come to accept what Keating calls our core of basic goodness. So this embracing part was a hard part to sustain for me. I don't know if that was true for you or if you even tried that.
No, I'm resonating big time, and I don't know. I heard you say it, and I'm going to say it now. That rather than to erase the defect, embrace. It was my on ramp where I got my first dose of acceptance. What I can accept can be changed, right? What I resist persists, but it can be changed not by me, because and what did we say? Catch it and release it, right? that I'm now, and that was my on ramp in retrospect to my first dose of self compassion.
Yes.
Rather than hanging my character defects out there and nuking them, trying to choke them to death, nuke them to death, blow them up, whatever. First of all, I don't look now, but I'm in charge. To surrendering, and if God is love, accepting that, and that's not a get out of jail free card, but then release, catch, release. Don't erase, embrace. And that to me, that was, as you call it, the next stage. And I didn't get there. I was brought to that place by all the other, you go to meetings and you do service work and you do the steps, and all of a sudden there's a new room in consciousness that includes the act as if. And in retrospect, it was okay. So if it's all about healing, I act as if to heal until another room opens up. Don't erase, embrace, catch, release, to heal, and then. And I want to turn that next and then over to you, because that brings us, I think, to where centering prayer and 12 steps come together for something exponentially greater than the two.
Yep. And while you were talking, when you were talking about embrace and release, that is so much what welcoming prayer is. And we'll talk about that later, but that's exactly what it is. Embrace and release. Yeah. So practically speaking, what are we going to do? How are we going to do step 6? Is there actually anything for us to do? So this last step in my evolution, I trace back to a talk I gave in 2013. And I had just heard my friend, Patty S., one of my favorite people ever in the program, give a talk on the 6th step. And she emphasized the pause, which led me to find these quotes. So I'm going to share my screen again. And the first two are from the 12 and 12. And the last one is from into action in the big book. In all times of emotional disturbance or decision, we can pause, ask for quiet, and in this stillness, simply say the serenity prayer. The next one, when in doubt, we can always pause, saying, not my will, but thine be done. This is from the 12 and 12. He had a more nuanced sense then of how are we going to work these steps. And then in chapter 6, as we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. Now, I had been practicing centering prayer for 5 years at this point. Not quite a daily practice, but pretty close. Step 6, said my friend Patty, is the pause we take just after our character defects gets activated, but before we act out on that defect. I'm going to say that again. Step 6 is the pause we take after our character defect gets activated, but before we act out on that defect. This was one of those things that when I heard it in a flash, I knew it was true, or true for me, right? And I'm gonna put one more slide up here. And this equation came to my mind immediately. The 6th step is where I pause and return to God. And the 6th step reminds me really of the 1st step, where I make the admission of powerlessness. And what is the action that goes with that admission? It's asking for help, right? So for me, suddenly what became clear when Patty said it's the pause we take in between when our character defect gets activated, but before we act out on it, it's this admission that I'm powerless over my defects of character, and I need God's help in this moment of powerlessness, right now, in this moment of powerlessness. So that key element was taking time to turn my attention to God, to invite God into the present moment. This is tricky because the context is my character defect is activated. Whatever's going on, I'm on the verge of acting out in a selfish, fearful, inconsiderate, dishonest way. And somehow, before I take the action that is going to create harm, I need to pause and turn towards my higher power. As Bill writes, what an order. I can't go through with it, right? Like this seems impossible. And in fact, before centering prayer, it was impossible. Once I was activated, I'm already going. It's happening. It is on. The harm is about to take place. Well, it turns out that centering prayer and its cousin welcoming prayer make taking the pause when I'm agitated or doubtful entirely possible. Every session of centering prayer is a rehearsal for that inevitable moment when I am ready to act out on my defects. Because in centering prayer, I learned to just observe my thoughts and let them go by. And I learned that even when I'm engaged with my thoughts, even troubling thoughts, I can let those go as well. With a little practice, simply by returning my attention to God's love and presence within me. And every session of welcoming prayer teaches me not to fight off or suppress uncomfortable feelings which inevitably feed my character defect-driven bad behavior, but instead to stay with them, embrace them, lean into them, and invite God into the moment. So that, for me, is that merging that we've been talking about of living in the pause. And step 6, this is literally the pause of living in the pause. And we practice it in centering prayer in order that we can turn to God and act out our willingness, our readiness for God's healing.
Yeah, to me, that's the great spiritual explosion. Just what you said in the last few minutes, that it warrants so much more. That's a big piece, almost too big to find words. But having said that what was coming up in me is today, character defects and false self they're a synonym. It's just centering. It's false self, 12-step character defect, and I loved it that when we notice that the defect has been triggered or the false self is in play, before I leak, the impulse, the inner urge to react with no mindlessly react in that space, pause, and the pause in and of itself is an action. And there's a suffering in that pause because I got a desire that's screaming to be satisfied, called, kill, 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 or whatever it is. And it's like, no, I'm going to stay in the pause. And there's that's the passion on the cross, if you will. That's the excruciating piece of excruciatingly wonderful. And then asking, look, lead me not into temptation. Heck, take it, and then that's an action. And it took me the longest time to go, that's an action? That's a prayer. And it's like, well, no, this is how we heal. And I'm finding over the years I woke up a little bit quicker. Like I couldn't, when I was pausing, it was too late. I paused, oh crap, it happened again. I had the fight about the dishwasher, and I'm looking on the back of the boat and looking at the wake, and I got a mess. Oh, and now I got to go and practice other steps called clean up the mess. It came where, wow, I'm in the middle of a volcanic eruption here, and I woke up long enough to pause, to fast forward. Wow, I'm beginning to wake up where I'm trembling, but I haven't leaked yet. And I don't bat 1,000. A lot of this is all over the board, but now I get where centering prayer connects to step 6, and all of a sudden living in the pause is way more than this poetic play on a slogan.
Right. It's the very heart of it. And yeah, we haven't eliminated the need for the amend steps yet. But when I do, I'll get back to you, Michael. We can do our talk. Say you don't need 8 and 9 or 10 for that matter. We're done with those.
Right. Well, this has been an extraordinary few minutes with you this afternoon, my friend. Is there anything else you want to say in closing?
Just that this new context will provide a very interesting difference for our step 7, I think. This pause. So.
Yeah. It's I love it. It's acting as if ... to heal, to the next stage of catch and release ... to heal, to take pause ... to heal. And the healing for me is when the desire to act out is turned down, not necessarily eliminated, but turned down to where I don't have to be hyper vigilant. And I find that in my recovery. So can't wait to see you next week and chat about step 7. And until then, thank you, my friend.
This was great, Michael. See you next week.
All right. See you next week.